Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. The last poll in Scotland, and we're waiting confirmed later on tonight, our time, early in the morning Scotland time, is that the no vote, the union vote, prevailed. The estimates are 54 to 46. Scotland remains in union with London, in union with Northern Ireland, and the promises made during these last hectic days will now be acted upon or not. So the story continues. But right now, the United Kingdom, the most successful sovereign state of Europe the last several hundred years, my opinion, stays together. We move now to a favorite of my colleague and co-host Mary Kissel, who joins from the Wall Street Journal editorial page, as well as the host of OpinionJournal.com. We move to a favorite of Mary's, also a member of what you'd have to say Mother Britain. This would be Australia. And within these last 24 hours, a surprising turn. Australia in the news in an alarming new fashion. Australia has suffered from Al-Qaeda during the first 14 years of the war, especially the attack in Bali that killed a lot of Australian nationals.
Two attacks in Bali.
2 attacks. Thank you, Mary.
And the embassy in Jakarta.
However, we now have this new threat, which is called variously Daesh, that's the French foreign minister, Fabius, or the Islamic State in the Iraq and the Levant. That would be the American government's version. ISIS is also the Islamic State in Iraq and the Sham, or the Islamic State. But suddenly, it's in suburban Sydney. This was the shock, which is why we go to Simon Breheny. He is at the Institute of Public Affairs. He is director of Legal Rights Project. Simon, a very good morning to you. The report that I got incompletely last night were arrests being made in Sydney. Men were pictured in videos being stood over by very strong-looking policemen. Right now, the Fox News is reporting on this side of the planet that counterterrorism has detained up to 15 people. The threat was, as I heard it last night, Simon, to abduct an Australian national at random and behead such a person on video as a way to intimidate the state. Your Prime Minister, Mr. Abbott, last night saying we're moving very effectively. What is the mood? What is the reaction this morning in Australia? Good morning to you, Simon.
Good morning. Look, as you and your listeners might be able to imagine, this is currently dominating Australia's headlines. In every newspaper in the country at the moment, this is being covered as the very significant issue that it is. Every one of this morning's breakfast programs was covering this because this is, as we have seen, the most significant terror raid that Australia has ever seen. To give you a picture of just how significant this has been, 800 police were involved in terror raids in 10 Sydney suburbs over the course of a number of hours in Sydney, and there have been a number of arrests made. We've got 2 confirmed arrests, and there are others that are being questioned, as we understand it. This has been a very, very significant police operation, and as you can understand, the media reaction has been quite significant this morning and last night.
Simon, we've heard an awful lot about Britain's domestic jihadi problem, but we very rarely hear about that problem in Australia. Is this something new, or has this been a problem since 9/11 down under?
It's been a growing problem, and it's been a growing concern for Australia's counter-terrorism forces and for our spy agencies. There are particular areas in Sydney's western suburbs, and this is where many of these terror raids were conducted yesterday, which are potential hotspots for this kind of activity. And obviously, over the past few weeks and months, we've seen some increased activity overseas, and the concern is that we have a number of Australians, estimates range from 40 to 60 people, who have travelled from Australia over to Syria and Iraq to fight in that theatre of war that's currently going on at the moment. The significant concern is that there are 40 to 60 people in Australia who are prepared to go over to a place like that and fight in a war like that. And obviously then the concern is, well, what's going on in Australia if we have 40 to 60 people who are willing to go and engage in that sort of conduct, and then what happens when they try to re-enter Australia? These are some very significant questions.
Let me press you on that, Simon, because there's reporting here that there's a protest against these arrests in Sydney. I suspect that that's from the Muslim community. This is a political matter now for Mr. Abbott, for the government. Is this new that you have an Islamic community that is pushing back against police presence?
This is new in the sense that we haven't seen protests like this about these sorts of issues, but the reality is that we simply haven't seen arrests like this. We haven't seen raids of this scale before. This is a very new thing, and certainly the reaction from the Muslim community in Western Sydney. In particular, there's a very active mosque in Western Sydney called the Lakemba Mosque, and many Muslims have gathered around that this morning and last night to protest that. So this is a significant political problem, as you say, now for the Prime Minister, but Prime Minister Tony Abbott is absolutely resolute in fighting what is seen as being a growing terrorist threat in Australia. And certainly we've seen over the last 24 hours the authorities are willing to take the kind of action that they think is required to stop this kind of thing going ahead. I mean, we can't be in a position where there is a plot to attack Parliament House. We can't be in a position where there are plots to behead random Australian citizens on the streets. I mean, these are harrowing plots that we're hearing about, and it's very, very concerning. And I think the Australian people are quite pleased that the authorities are there to do something about this.
Simon, I've always been stunned when I've gone to your country to see members of Parliament, even members of the shadow cabinet, sitting in a pub, no security, hanging out with their friends, just like anybody else. Is that going to change now? Is Australia going to lose the kind of 1950s happy-go-lucky atmosphere that it's enjoyed to date?
I certainly hope not. I quite like the fact that we have parliamentarians, as you say, even senior ministers at pubs with sometimes no security around them.
And a couple of drinks.
Yes, exactly. And the kind of freedom that we have in Australia, where parliamentarians and as you say, even ministers and senior ministers and the Prime Minister feel as though they are safe in going to the pub and having a drink with the punters, that is something that I think would be very, very sad to lose. But the reaction that we've seen from police over the last 24 hours around Parliament House has been very significant.
Simon, just to explain that, it seems like the government realized that it was not secure, that there was a way for terrorists to get in, and they reacted quickly just in these last hours. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. A terrorist plot has been revealed by ASIO, the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, on Parliament House. That's our Congress, if you like, and the security around Parliament House is generally quite sort of, it's at a medium level, it's at a moderate level, it's not very high. As long as you have someone within Parliament House to sign you in, you can generally make your way into Parliament House, and obviously media have quite significant access. You don't need for an MP, a Member of Parliament, to sign you in. You don't need for that kind of thing to happen, and so it's a very significant concern if there's a plot that's been uncovered, which it has been, and there's a belief that terror threat is high.
Simon, so, my concern, last question for you about this.
Yeah.
Abbott, is he handling this well? What's the opinion of the commentariat this morning? Are they pleased with him, or was he slow to this? Is he being blamed for sloppiness?
No, absolutely not. And the reason why I say that is because no one saw this coming.
Right.
There was no leaks at all that came from any of the vast number of agencies that were involved in these raids. The Prime Minister has obviously been involved in planning this and has been briefed over a number of days, and it's quite extraordinary. It's quite an extraordinary feat to have a raid involving 800 police in Sydney's western suburbs in very built-up areas. years for that to have been kept quiet for as long as it has been. The commentariat in Australia is not all that friendly to Conservative
Certainly not.
like Mr Abbott.
No, they're not.
But I think there's a general consensus that this has been handled very well,
Simon.
and certainly I think that consensus is correct.
Simon Breheny is Director of Legal Rights Project at the Institute of Public Affairs in Melbourne. Mary Kissel, the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal. The President of the United States last week speculating about a transnational threat by the Islamic State. I can certainly look to Sydney right now as threatened as any state, and if it can happen to Sydney, I'm John Batchelor.